It sure is nice to come home at the end of a long day and enjoy a podcast. But you know what makes the experience that much better? Relaxing with a few puffs of smoke from my McQueen pipe. At McQueenPipes.com, I was able to find the perfect smoking pipe to suit my nerdy, yet dignified sensibilities. I especially love that each pipe is designed and handcrafted by a true artisan, and that all of their pipes are inspired by fantasy books and movies like The Lord of the Rings. Being a bit of a hobbit myself, my pipe is called the Barrel Rider, but they've also got pipes for wizards, rangers, dragon riders, or even goblins. If pipe tobacco isn't your thing, no worries. McQueen Pipes has got you covered with attachments for vaping or even cannabis. Head on over to McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout to receive 15% off of your entire order. Go ahead. Treat your nerdy heart to something you'll cherish and enjoy your podcast listening experience in style with a McQueen pipe. That's Mac like mac and cheese and Queen like the band. McQueenPipes.com and use the code BIOGRAPHERS at checkout for a 15% discount on your whole order. Cheers, everyone, and happy podcasting.
I do hope you can see me today from where you are.
Ich bin ein Dilly.
If I'm generally anything, I guess I'm generally miserable. This modern world of science and invention is of particular interest to women.
The people, I would say, there is no patent. Don't you patent the sun?
I regard myself as a soldier, though a soldier of peace.
Welcome to the Biographers.
Verifying that letter that was in the Ken Burns documentary, and she goes, I was in the Ken Burns documentary, and we go, oh no!
Yeah. I was like, one of the questions was, did you get to meet Ken Burns? And she was like, well, I was actually one of the talking heads in the Ken Burns documentary series. So, and I was like, wait. What? And so I had to go back and rewatch it. And to be fair, it was 30 years ago, just about, that the documentary came out. So,
really?
Yeah, it came out in 2000, like 2001. So
That's not 30 here.
It's 26 years ago. So we're getting close.
Yeah.
So, and if it was probably recorded at least a year or two before that.
Yeah.
So now she's, probably in her 60s, if not a little bit older. So when I went back and looked, it was like, she looked like almost a baby. You know what I mean?
Crazy.
Yeah. And anyways, that was pretty fun.
Yeah, but it was a great interview. She really liked it. So
yeah. And the reason I bring it up is because it was the first time that we had ever done like a Zoom recording interview. And when she jumped onto the call, we couldn't hear her at all through the system that we have set up, but she could hear us, so we had to like panic for 5 minutes and figure out how to make everything work.
Every time.
every time. Not like we've been recording for the last how many years, but
it's just been you and me. It's not like a
No, it's one reason I don't have people on the show.
Yeah.
Every time it's like I can't use two microphones. I can't use as
Yeah. My tech limits are that of a caveman. So if Daniel doesn't know how to do it, nobody knows how to do it. And
then it's not getting done.
It's not getting done.
No, my newest challenge, I'm actually pretty darn good, which is why, Max, when we had that first conversation, I was like, if we ever did get to that point where you were nice enough to be like, yeah, guys, come on the show at some point in person, I'm actually very good with audio stuff. Akiva knows this. Yes. I host trivia once a week at this little bar not too far from our house. And when I first started there, the audio sucked. It was out of a single speaker for the entire restaurant.
Yeah, I remember you talking about this. Yeah.
So now I have like a wireless system. And when I first started testing it out, there was all this like cracking and impedance where like they were being overloaded in certain places. So I had to figure out how to like change basically gain in a bunch of different places, then reduce it where I was outputting. Anyway. That's just a long story to say I'm very good with audio.
I'm so bad at all that stuff. I still use, to do my videos, I still use a $20 plug-in wired lav mic.
Really?
I have $1,500 Sennheiser wireless.
That's crazy.
Mics.
Well, your audio is great too.
But that's the thing. I can't tell much of a difference. And I'm like, well, this is much easier. And I know that the battery won't die. So,
hey, if it works, I say, who cares?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
You don't have to have the best of the best to have it, sound good. Well, let's kick things off here, everybody. First of all, hi, welcome to The Biographers and a special bonus edition episode. Y'all have already heard his voice, but we are joined by a very, very awesome guest today, Mr. Max Miller of the YouTube channel Tasting History. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
Apart from a cold, which I'm sorry.
Apart from a lingering cold, yes. Yeah. Or allergies, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you are set to go to Egypt in a couple days. So, really hoping you get better soon, man. Are you taking any medication or to feel better, or are you just?
I have not. I've just been powering through lately. I probably should try some Allegra or something. Not sponsored, but try something.
I like that that's where you got to. Of all the drugs possible out there, you're like Allegra.
Well, because I it's just like this light cough that's left, and I'm like, well, maybe that's a bit of allergies. I don't know.
Yeah,
that's fair.
I'm not sure if this happened, but in Colorado we had the craziest flu season. I felt like a 1800s Victorian child who was going to pass away. Look one last time into the garden before I passed away. And I ended up having a cough for a week afterwards. So recording was real fun, just muting every 5 seconds as Daniel was trying to get through one single story. But
yeah,
we managed to make it through.
It happens. Well, cool. For those that, if you're here, you probably know, but we also have our own set of audience members that probably don't know. We're doing a little collab together, Tasting History and the Biographers. And, well, I guess first, Akiva, and probably you, Max, as well, what are we doing? What's the collab?
Yeah, so we, if you haven't already watched it, on the Tasting History channel, we're going to be talking about the unique eating habits of Nikola Tesla. Max and I have been working on researching what foods our peculiar electrical inventor enjoyed and how he liked to enjoy them, which was really specific and kind of odd, and took a lot more research than I would have expected to find out that information. So sort of as a result, we wanted to talk a little bit about the times that we have been taken in when we are, researching for different characters, the times that we have dealt with false information from very verifiable sources, and times where there was information out there and we just couldn't have access to it, because we definitely ran into a couple of snags trying to figure out what Nikola Tesla himself liked to eat.
Yes.
So, yeah. And specifically for Tesla, and actually I am curious about this, Max, have you been thinking about doing a Tesla series or even an episode for a while, or have you already done one?
So Tesla's been on my list for ages. Mm-hmm. Yes. But it's interesting because very often, I'll write down an idea because I hear something interesting and I'm like, oh, I'm going to dig into that more later. And what intrigued me at the beginning ended up not actually being nearly the most interesting thing about him. I think what interested me was I had seen somebody talk about how he drank warm milk and ate celery soup, and that was his big diet. And I was like, oh, okay, so maybe there's something there. Well, that's at the very end of his life. When
every old person drinks warm milk and eats celery soup.
Exactly. Yeah, it's this is not revolutionary.
Mythical Kitchen, when they're doing last meals, I can't remember who it was who said what they preferred their last meal to be, and they're like soup and crackers because that's what old people eat, and I want to live as long as possible. I was like, that's smart.
There you go.
That's what I want my last meal to be, is just like a cup of yogurt.
That's so sad.
That way I know that I'm 100 years old. Can't chew a steak anymore. That's
no
fine.
Way,
it's
man.
I always think of Richard Nixon when he was getting ready to leave office in disgrace. He could have anything. The White House chef would have made him absolutely anything, and he chose to have cottage cheese and pineapple, which I like cottage cheese and pineapple, but it's kind of like, that was your, but you know what? He was probably nervous. His tummy was probably, so I get it.
Yeah.
But I don't know. By the way,
it just kind of adds to the patheticness of his situation.
Yeah. I also, when you set up that story, I thought you were gonna be like, and Richard Nixon, when he was getting ready to, I thought you were gonna say, die. He wanted cottage cheese and pineapple.
Politically, he did. So
Yeah.
Touche.
It's hilarious.
So with Tesla, when you initially thought, I want to do a series on him, or at least an episode on him, kind of a thing, he's eating milk and honey and celery soup. What was the interesting thing that you ended up finding out over time that you were like, that's actually way more interesting than celery soup and milk and honey?
Well, it's what you guys sent me.
I'm teeing you up. Do you see how we're doing this?
Yeah, no, it was what you guys sent me. It wasn't the stuff later on in his life, his very interesting ideas about, when to eat and why you should eat, because it like lines up with the rotation of the earth and, some of those other things. Very interesting, but it's actually the earlier portion of his life that I found more interesting. His need to have 24 napkins to wash every single piece of silverware and cutlery or plates and everything after they had already been sanitized in the kitchen. And I found an interesting tidbit. So he had, obviously a lot of phobias. And one of the phobias that his friend mentions is a phobia of pearls.
Yes.
And so if you were going to dinner with him, you shouldn't wear pearls. He said sometimes if his dinner guests wore pearls, he couldn't even concentrate.
Yeah.
So I'm just very interesting guy to have dinner with, which is probably why he very often did it alone.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah. Did you mention that in the series?
We did. We talked about it in one of the earlier episodes, because we basically wrote out sort of a laundry list of the different neurodivergencies that Tesla struggled with or benefited from. And one of them was most likely, although he wasn't obviously diagnosed, synesthesia, which is, the crossing of wires when you can sense one sense through another. You can see sounds and hear colors, or perhaps it would trigger something. And what I thought was so interesting about Tesla was that we talked about this with Da Vinci. People kind of see Da Vinci, and you talked about this a bit with the Armored Turnips episode. Yeah. People see Da Vinci as like a wizard, when really he was a very astute person who liked to study, but like Mark Cypher's book is titled Wizard, The Life and Times of Nikola Tesla. And I think that's a super apt name, because he kind of was Victor Frankenstein wizard sort of guy, where he would do all the studying, and then in some crazy flash of light, he would come up with a new idea.
Yeah. No, he was brilliant. And so to bring us to kind of what we were going to talk about, here's this brilliant man who has so many fascinating things that actually are true about him. And yet, so often people make up bull about him, make up new stories and new things about him and Da Vinci and Mozart and so many of these people, Jefferson. You hear they just make it up, and it ends up kind of creeping into the accepted history. And so it ends up coming difficult to parse. But I'm always like, you didn't need to make this up. There's plenty there.
Yeah. I wrote something down yesterday that kind of clicked it into my head when I was thinking about it. My wife and I were talking about the interview, and she was helping me like write down some of my thoughts. And something that I said was, when your contribution becomes so profound that it's unbelievable, people will come up with unbelievable ways to explain it. Right? Where it's, people like Da Vinci and Tesla guessed right on so many different factors of our modern life that the average person's like, oh, it had to be aliens. And it's like, why is that your first assumption? Why isn't your assumption that this guy read a lot of books?
Hey, do not write out the possibility that Tesla was an alien, because I like that idea.
I'm sure you like that idea. A lot of people like that idea. Like a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about Tesla with some of my students in my knife making class, and one of them suggested that he tapped into the Akashic record, which I don't know much about that conspiracy theory, but apparently it's like this third dimension that has all of human knowledge that certain people can tap into. And I'm like, that's kind of offensive. This guy basically like sacrificed his brain and his health working 20 hours a day, literally 20 hours a day for most of his life to get that smart. And you're saying that it's because you can tap into the wizard domain or something,
Yeah. Well, no, it's also when people ascribe, just pure, when it comes to somebody like Mozart or any of the great artists, it's like, oh, they just have something. And it's like, yes, they do. And they also practice a lot. It is a skill that they have honed.
Yes.
You know, yes, they have something else that makes them much better at that, which is, you know, why Michael Jordan may be a better basketball player than some others. But he also practiced a lot. And so, you know, it is like you're diminishing the person's work when you just kind of make up this. Yeah.
I see this a lot with like visual artists. My wife does basically character design and does art in general. That's her full-time gig. And something that she gets told a lot is, oh my God, you have massive talent. You know, you're so talented. And it's nice. And I know that a lot of people mean it as a compliment, but a lot of artists are like, for Shalena, for instance, she's like, I've been drawing since I was 6. Like my entire childhood, I was staying in my room drawing pictures. That's going to do something to it, you know?
Yeah. Well, when I used to do theater and I was in music and everything. Yeah. And very often the most talented people were not the most successful because they would often kind of rely on that talent to get them far and never had to learn how to practice or how to study. And I think it's the same with, you know, just being smart in general. And if you don't learn the skills of practicing, you will eventually hit a wall. And it's the people who are not as talented, but work their butt off who end up pushing past that wall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, Max, well, first of all, have you seen the movie Whiplash?
Oh God, yes.
It's one of my favorite. I actually just got the vinyl of it because I watched it like last week for the 7th time or whatever. It makes me think of that exact same concept, right? Of like, there's talent, and then there's just you have to practice your ass off in order to get anywhere successful and be considered great, kind of a thing. But anyhow, before we get into any of that, I'm curious because I do know that we want to talk about research, things that are false inside of history, and all that kind of stuff. Before we even get into that, though, can you give us just sort of a breakdown? How did you get into tasting history? What was the story there? Were you always a history nerd? Did you just like food and cooking, and then it was a happy little marriage?
Yeah,
like what was the story?
Yeah, before
it was actually aliens.
Oh,
alien.
See, Akiva? See?
Sometimes. No, it's so funny because if you had told me, gosh, even 10 years ago that I would be doing anything to do with food and cooking, I would have just laughed at you because I didn't cook at all.
Really?
No, I couldn't cook. Like, I didn't know how to boil pasta. I mean,
wow.
Yeah. And then I watched the Great British Bake Off and I became obsessed with it because in the early days, they would talk about the history of the different foods that they were making. Yep. And I've always been a history buff. So that was the hook that got me in. And I was like, ooh, a Battenberg. And it's, you know, about the Battenberg family of 19th century England and everything. I'm going to now learn how to make that. And again, in the early seasons of the Great British Bake Off, they would actually teach you how to bake.
Yeah.
Now there isn't that aspect. It's been Americanified, I feel. But in those early seasons, they actually had something called Masterclass. So after the episode, Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood for an hour would walk you step by step, teaching you how to bake what they just made on the show. And so I learned how to bake from watching that, and then got all their cookbooks and everything, and just became obsessed because I am one of those people who will just become obsessed with something. Mm-hmm. And so I spent all of my time baking and I would bring it into work. I was working at Walt Disney Studios at the time in marketing, and I would bring it to work and I would let my coworkers eat it. But if they wanted to eat the cake, they had to listen to a little history about the cake first. And eventually, of course. And I was, you know, it was like 2019 and I was trying to figure out a way to frankly make more money because I love Disney, but they don't pay great. And I was like, maybe a YouTube channel might be the way to make a few extra bucks. And one of my coworkers said, that thing that you do to us, put that on YouTube. People will watch it. And she was absolutely correct. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah, that's
cool.
incredible.
So when it comes to, I'm assuming that you're like us, where we don't necessarily have a criteria for who it is that we're covering or why. It is really just whatever strikes our interest and whatever we're able to stumble upon that we go, that seems cool. And then we kind of run with it and do what we do. Is that, first of all, pretty similar for you?
Yeah, and it has to be what I'm interested in at that very moment. That's why
Yes.
my list of ideas very often I don't go back because it's like, oh, I was interested in that, but then I heard this thing just yesterday, and so now this brand new piece of information is going to be next week's video.
Yeah.
Instead of the one that I've been promising people I would make for the last 3 years.
So when you say you heard this thing the other day, where are you hearing that from?
Oh, it can be a lot of different places. Sometimes it's a podcast or a video or, a documentary. Very often I heard this is I was researching a different video and I came across this interesting tidbit in one of the books or whatever. And I'm like, well, that doesn't really fit in this video, but I'm going to go down that path next week because I think that's really interesting.
That kind of brings me to sort of a point that that's sort of similar with the, being duped, right? When you're doing your research, which is I find myself going down rabbit holes endlessly and finding history that I was not expecting. I think a great example was when I was studying Mary Shelley. There is a time where completely out of the blue, it seems there is this extra character that gets thrown in who turns out to be in the 1800s a trans individual who Mary Shelley actually finds a way to sneak them over to France so that they can avoid I can't remember if it was an enlistment or a persecution and end up living their life out with another person that was also hopping the country, and the two ended up getting married and living happily ever after for a while in France. And it was this complete beautiful little love story pocketed in the Mary Shelley universe that I was like, I want to do a whole episode about this because I just didn't even expect to stumble upon this incredible story about this random character that, kind of ends up dying on some Wikipedia page and there's no more follow-up or research on them.
No, I love those. I love those things that pop up. Or when you're researching someone and kind of reading their story, and then this other name will drop in, and it's just a passing thing. And it's like, wait, I know that name. And then that person turns out to be a huge part of, he was like Napoleon's right-hand man or whatever, but he just happened to be at the flower shop of this one person. It's just like it's so interesting, especially when you get into like the 19th century and history just becomes a little bit more detailed. There's just more information. I just love these names that just kind of like, they were everywhere. They're like the Forrest Gump of,
So we actually bringing it up, we have our own patron saint of the biographers, which was it the very first season?
Very first series, that we did. It was on somebody that I learned about because my in-laws, my wife's parents, live down in a little town in northern New Mexico called Taos. And you actually have heard of it?
Yeah. Never been though.
Oh, you should go. It's really lovely. And if you're ever there, let me know because we go there all the time. We can meet up. But there was a woman who basically made Taos what it is. Like the reason we know it as Taos, not just a tiny little town, was this woman named Mabel Dodge Lujan. She, if
it's
you're
like
ever
the Kevin
curious,
Bacon of history. I don't even understand it.
Her story is fascinating. So if you're ever curious, you can listen to the series on it. It is our first series, so give us a little bit of grace when it comes to.
We're just going to tell a bunch of people to watch our first episode. No. Okay. Anyway,
it is still good. But Mabel, she was just one of those people. Like we said, she was absolutely everywhere. She knew everyone, and the more that we get into everything, the more that we're like, oh my gosh. She knew this person. So the most recent example was when we did Mark Twain. Mark Twain became friends with this guy named Henry Rogers, who was part of Standard Oil. Standard Oil, he was like the president. He invented the oil pipeline, for example. They became really close friends, and he actually bailed Mark Twain out of a really dire financial situation. I'm down in Taos about a month and a half, 2 months ago over the holidays, and we go to this museum. It's called the Millicent Rogers Museum. And we go, and I'd heard about this woman before. She also had an affair with Ian Fleming, who we did a series on Ian Fleming too. We go to this museum and I read her little excerpt and it's like, oh yeah, she was the granddaughter of Henry Rogers. Yeah. So there's the connection, because Millicent Rogers was also friends with Mabel. So therefore Mabel knew her, who knew Henry Rogers, who knew Mark Twain. And there's just this constant network that we discover about
even
how
with
people are connected.
Da Vinci, we find out that Mabel Dodge was friends with one of the last, not Sforzas, the last Medici. One of the, well, now that's highly debated because the bloodline, you know, with royal families is always funky. But one of the very last people with the last name Medici from that bloodline was a good friend of hers. And it was this very tragic falling out that was really sad, but still connected to Leonardo da Vinci. We found that she was connected to Ian Fleming. We found that she was connected to Mark Twain. It was just
a lot of people.
It's really weird because it was the first season. I wasn't even the co-host at the time, and every person that we've done since has somehow had a connection. I even think we found a connection when we were doing Pancho Villa.
Well, we did, because she was, sorry, and Max, we're going into a rabbit hole here.
Yes.
But essentially she dated a guy named John Reed, who was an investigative journalist for Metropolitan magazine, I believe. And John Reed actually went down to investigate and report on the Mexican Revolution, and actually ended up becoming good friends with Pancho Villa. He actually ended up fighting with Pancho Villa. And Mabel, being her crazy self, was like, I'm going to go with you. So she went down to the border of Mexico with this guy, John Reed, and he was smart enough to be like, you're not coming. You're going to die if you come with me. So she stayed, but there we go. There was another connection that we kind of found. But all of this being said, where I want to go in terms of questions for you, obviously we start to hear these things about how people are connected, what they do. You know, when I was doing Ian Fleming, for example, people kept coming over to me and saying, did you know that James Bond is based off of Christopher Lee, who played Saruman, right, in the Lord of the Rings series? And I kept having to say, that is not true. They didn't even really know each other. Like, he may have heard stories that were, you know, slightly inspired by, but more than anything, James Bond was an amalgamation mostly based off of Ian Fleming himself. So when it comes to when you find something that's interesting, what's your process for determining the truth? How do you get there?
So, you know, the first thing I do, of course, is just see if other reputable sources have mentioned this. And very often a red flag is if different sources use the exact same wording. Because true. And it's, you know, it's getting even harder and harder, of course, with AI writing, but so often it's like, oh, they're using the exact same wording across these different sources. So they're just using each other as a source.
Yep.
Which, you know, that happens and that's fine. But then that is always a red flag for me. So I'm like, okay, now I need to go find out where this originally came from. And so it usually, you know, I end up trying to find a primary source. And the thing is, so I'm not a historian proper. I am a lover of history and a history educator, I would say. But so I put a lot of stock in primary sources, even when I know the primary source might not be accurate, you know, reputable, accurate. It's like, I love the primary sources of ancient Rome. Well, Suetonius made stuff up all the time. But I'm like, but he made it up 2,000 years ago, so I'm going to share that story because it's interesting. So I put more stock in, but I always put the caveat, you know, he obviously had an agenda and everything. Yeah. But I like to find the primary source. Where did this claim come from? And so, like in the case of an Ian Fleming, Christopher Lee thing, I would need to be like, it would need to come from Ian Fleming.
Right.
Ian Fleming would need to have been the person to have said, yeah, I based James Bond off of Christopher Lee. And if I can't find that, then whether it's true or not, there isn't enough evidence for me to put that. Maybe if it was like, oh yes, his wife later on wrote that he had said that, okay, that would be fine. But I'm guessing that is not how it ended up being.
No.
Yeah.
So usually that's my course, is just try to find the primary source. And obviously how I find those, that changes every time. It's a little bit different.
Yeah, and it's tough too, because when you're trying to do part entertainment, part history education, you're kind of going between the two poles of, super fun short video and NPR academic research, and still trying to bring people in. Like, I found that like a scholarly source is not the same thing as an original source, right? When I'm writing, for instance, I'm doing Frida Kahlo right now. I'm basing most of my book off of Hayden Herrera, who talked directly with people who knew Frida Kahlo. And there's a lot of stuff that's right, a lot of stuff that needs to be updated because the book was written 30, 40 odd years ago. And there's this whole thing between Frida and Trotsky having some sort of relationship that was even in, Frida, the movie with Salma Hayek, which Hayden Herrera helped produce, that we now find from some newly recovered letters is not true. So you still have to see those new sources. But then, kind of like what we dealt with the Nikola Tesla episode, some of those new sources can misattribute quotes from primary sources. The very first time that I read one of the quotes for the Nikola Tesla episode, I read a quote that was supposedly from John O'Neill saying that Tesla used 18 napkins at each service because it was divisible by 3. But then you emailed me saying, hey, I saw the book that you pulled that from, and then I went to the original source, John O'Neill's book itself, and John O'Neill says 24. And it's, a minor thing. I imagine the author that I was pulling from, Lisa Aldrich, thought 1824 was, looking between one book and the other and just typed in the wrong number. And it's really that simple. But you still need those new sources because those new sources provide information that the contemporaries didn't have. Right.
Right. Yeah.
So it's tough.
It is a balancing game. And yes, very often when things are not correct, it's not malicious.
No.
What I've found is more often is that it can usually be tied to either something that was, and malicious isn't the right word, but something that was Victorian very often, because the Victorians just loved making up history.
Yeah.
If they didn't have an origin story for a word or something, they would just make it up. And that's just what they did. Honeymoon being the word honeymoon comes from the fact that they used to drink mead for a month after being wed. That is not true. There is no evidence to support that, but it is the first time I included that in my video on mead. And that was the first time that I realized I had been taken in because that is just so often repeated in every history of mead, in every history of honey, in the dictionary. And you feel like the dictionary is a reputable source. But it's just, some of these fake facts end up getting repeated so often that they become accepted truth.
Or like Ishtar and the Easter Bunny, right? There's some religious scholar, I want to say also Victorian age, who tried to, attribute the Easter Bunny with this pagan god Ishtar, and there's really no actual basis for it besides another quote that he heard from somebody else who was just kind of speculating. And that's just so often what it is. And so and again, it's like, it's not malicious, it's just bad history. Yeah.
And so, okay. But then there are also times where it is a little more, it's either very malicious, like something is being made up because of an agenda, because of a political agenda, or they need this to fit because they've put all of this work into this research paper and it turns out, oh, the pieces don't quite fit. Well, I'm going to just jam them in there. Or, and I've found this on multiple occasions, it's coming from something that was satire. But when it's repeated, it's no longer satire. So there is a quote from the early 20th century about how, and you'll see this all over. And you mentioned NPR being, it's on NPR. It's in the Smithsonian. So even these very reputable sources, you can't always accept everything because, so this quote basically says that pies are evil, that there was this group of people in early 20th century America who were so against pies and felt that they were bringing down society, that people were eating too much pie, blah, 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 blah. And it's just this fascinating quote. And I went to find the original source and it reads like that. And it's like, okay, that's it. And it was only because something in there just seemed so over the top that I decided to look up the person who wrote it. And it turns out that she was a journalist, but also a very well-known satirist of the age.
You just bit the 200-year-old onion.
Well, we don't know her. She's not famous or anything like that. It's like if Mark Twain had written that, then it's satire because that was his biting wit. This person is not famous. And so only in one article from like the 1950s where it was interviewing her daughter or something did I find that, yes, a lot of her stuff was satire, and she would write this weekly column that was satirizing some aspect of American society. And now you have all of these well-known sources, reputable sources, using that as gospel truth. And so it's like, it happens. At no point was anyone trying to mislead. That's just what happens.
Yeah.
The Da Vinci thing is the same thing. I did a whole video on all of this really interesting stuff about Da Vinci being absolute bunk. But it's been repeated by so many reputable sources, books, true good history books on Da Vinci talking about this. And it's because it came from a satirical book that was written in the early 80s that by the time it got put up online, where it could then spread like wildfire, it was no longer being taken in the context of satire. It had come out on April Fool's Day back in like 1981 or whatever. But when it was put up online, that was forgotten. And all that was left was the actual satirical piece of literature. But if you don't know it's satire, it just reads as true.
Yeah. Another one that is kind of interesting that comes from primary sources, which I've run into, is the primary source just straight up not understanding what it is that they're trying to educate someone on. For instance,
all the time.
We talked about this in the Tesla episode. In Colorado Springs, my hometown, basically, the very first song
you have four hometowns, by the way.
I do. But I lived in Colorado Springs the longest, right?
This is going to be really confusing to historians in the future, by the way. He was born in where?
I was born in Atlanta, lived in LA, lived in Seattle.
Lived in Ellicott, lived in Colorado Springs, Denver.
Okay, Ellicott's kind of Colorado. It's all the same. Whatever. Anyway.
Sorry.
Colorado Springs, the very first time that song was transmitted on the radio was by Nikola Tesla through an FM transmitter. We actually played it in the episode. Daniel was able to find one of the earliest recordings of this very song, and we actually played it, which was so cool. But the reporter who was tasked to report on Tesla doing the transmission misunderstood what Tesla was trying to say completely. He was talking about FM transmissions running along the ground and him being able to transmit signals along the ground. And the guy somehow took it as Tesla saying that there's free unlimited energy under the ground and all we have to do is dig it up and we got electricity for life. And that's what the article came out as. And then right afterwards, Marconi starts talking about the radio and someone actually understands what Marconi is trying to say. And that's how we get Marconi invented the radio versus Tesla, when the first song happened years before. But, you know, the reporter just had no idea what he was talking about. Just so interesting.
No, it happens all the time. Especially when, and I find this, and I do share these sources because I find them fascinating, but I always do put a caveat. The people who were traveling throughout history, some of the great travelers did a lot of writing, and very often they would come against a culture that was completely foreign to them. And they would be writing what they were seeing through their lens, because we can only write through our lens. So you can't blame them. But it turns out that it's just absolutely like not what is actually happening. You know, very often, especially with like the early explorers of the New World, or going over to Japan in the 17th century, it's just like, well, that's not what's happening, but that is what this Dutch person was seeing. And there is something to be said about that being worth sharing.
Sure.
What did this foreigner take away from this, experience?
Yeah.
But sometimes those mistakes are innocuous, and sometimes those mistakes end up causing confusion that becomes detrimental. Like the idea of now there was cannibalism in the Caribbean during in the years before and during the early conquest there.
Which, by the way, are you going to make an episode on that, or is that?
I've talked about it. I probably won't be
just
making
like asking your friends,
dishes.
like, do you consent? Just in case an accident happens.
For this episode, I went to rural Vietnam to find human flesh.
This time on Tasting History, the last episode. The fact that the word cannibal actually comes not from people eating food, but that was simply a misinterpretation of what I believe it was actually Christopher Columbus was hearing the people were called. And so he just attributed all of them to eating people. And so, and then that gets spread, because then that goes back to Europe and gets put into numerous newspapers and writings, and that ends up being changed along the way. And so then when hundreds and hundreds of years later, it still finds itself into history books, even though it was just a misunderstanding, or very often, the word was just heard incorrectly.
Yeah. Isn't there like a Native American people in the Caribbean whose name means in their native language, I don't know what you're saying? And this could be also false history because I haven't researched this, but I'm pretty sure that there is some Native American group in the Caribbean where, while trying to, identify themselves to people from the old world, they were like, so what do you call yourselves? And they're like, I don't understand what you're saying. And then that's the word that they are now referred to as.
I mean, it's very, very likely. It's how did Canada get its name? The people of the area had a word for like home base, like their town, their village. Yes. And it was Kanata. And I might be getting this slightly incorrect, but this is the general idea. And it was Kanata. And when this Frenchman came over and was like, what is this place called? They're like, oh, Kanata. He's like, oh, this land is Canada. Well, no, it was just like, that was the name for like home,
the country of my house.
and so it was just, no, it's Canada.
Now, hang on. We did move on from this really quickly, and I do want to circle back to it. Is that you were talking about the honeymoon and mead. Do you know where that actually came from, if it didn't come from that sort of popular myth?
I don't. I haven't gone down that rabbit hole.
Doesn't this make you want to pull your hair out? Like, it's so frustrating too, because, you know, obviously we are not historians, but I do sympathize with people who are professionals, where non-professionals are like, just give me a straight answer. And you're like, I can't. And if anybody does, they can't either. They're just lying, or they're not smart enough to realize. It just makes you want to, like, it just makes me want to pull my hair out. And I also feel like there's a lot of research stuff that people were taught when they were younger about what is a good source and what is a bad source that is no longer relevant because of the internet. And I just want to say, and maybe you'll disagree with me on this, I stand on my soapbox firmly on Wikipedia. I think because it's boring, it's not very edited, and it can get you to the right place really easily, and you can generally assume that it's right way more than you think you can.
Yes.
No, Wikipedia is one of the greatest. I think it's one of the greatest inventions of the last 30 years. I think
it really bums me out that people are trying to take it down now.
I think of mankind, honestly.
It's because, are there things that are incorrect? Yes, but they get fixed.
They do.
They get fixed very quickly as soon as new information is given. And Wikipedia is so good at citing sources. So even if there is something in there that's correct, you have the ability to scroll down to the bottom and find where this information came from. And then you can do the due diligence of going to find that, and maybe it's a secondary source, so you need to go to their bibliography or whatever. And when something is in Wikipedia that does not have a source, it says citation needed. Somebody put this in here, but we don't know if it's true or not. And so then I don't take it as gospel truth. Then I'm like, okay, I need to go find where this is. And so
in a world where there is
Wikipedia is wonderful.
Error.
It's not the end, but it is a wonderful place to start.
Totally agree. And in a world where there is the human error versus the robot error, now that we are basically competing on information between AI and human information on the internet these days, I'm going to pick the human error every time, because at least it gives me a lead. For instance, I did an episode or a season on General Alexander Dumas. Not Alexander Dumas, the author, but his father, who was basically a right-hand man to Napoleon, a revolutionary through and through, grew up in Saint-Domingue. There's only like one good biography on him that I have found. And, I am not an AI person in any capacity. I hope it all crashes in on itself for the most part. But I did at some point in desperation try to look up on ChatGPT, when was General Alexander Dumas the Count of Baitory, which was his family name? And they go, he wasn't. And I'm like, I would much rather have a human be wrong about something, and then at least it gives me a lead, than just take this regurgitation machine's input for face value and then never be able to explore those rabbit holes.
Yeah, so I'm not a big AI person in general. I have found that ChatGPT is excellent at translations and excellent at reading old handwriting, something I struggle greatly with. It's kind of amazing how good, you can take a screenshot and put it in ChatGPT and it knows everything that's being written. But when it comes to research, it's a mess. It's an absolute mess. You can't trust it. And what I really hate is that it can't admit that it is wrong. It has the attribute of one of the worst people, and it is that it can't admit that it's wrong. Yeah. And so it will just make stuff up. If I'm asking, if I ask for something and it doesn't know, it won't say, I don't know. It will say, here's the quote and here's who said it. And you're like, the quote may not exist at all, or it's misattributed, but it doesn't tell you where it got it. Or actually, even worse, it will tell you where it got it. And it will give you a link to where it got it. And then you click that link and it's not there. Mm-hmm. It's something totally different. And it's an absolute mess. And I lament the proliferation of people using it to create videos online, to create static posts online. I'm not naming any names, but there are certain channels that have gotten really big that you can tell that it is a lot of AI research. There are just too many mistakes, and they're putting out too much content. So unless they have a team of 50 people making these mistakes, it is one person in ChatGPT, and it's just but they get repeated and shared on Facebook and Instagram and everything, and so it starts to become accepted knowledge. Yeah. And I think that issue that has been an issue for many, many years is on wildfire now. Because instead of somebody having to actually like rewrite it and actually post a blog post regurgitating bad facts, now it's AI, and it can do that 1,000 times in an hour. And it's just everywhere. Pictures too. Finding historic pictures is one of the hardest parts of my job, and it has gone from being difficult to nearly impossible in some cases, because very often you cannot tell what is AI and what is not. And some of it is made specifically to look like an actual old picture of something.
And grainy videos and photos are even easier to hide the extra finger or the foot that's not quite looking right in the shadow. It's just getting really, really hard. So I'm trying lately, basically, if it is coming from a website or a source or an article written after 2022, I try not to use it, which sucks. Because there is still new information coming out. Like we said, I have an upcoming video on Stonehenge, or actually by the time this comes out, it'll be an old video on Stonehenge. And just 2 years ago, they discovered or likely discovered where one of the stones came from was actually in northern Scotland, and this whole paper was done and everything, and it was just 2 years ago. And so new work is still being done on very old subjects. Right. And so to have that meddled with all of this AI slop it's heartbreaking.
Totally agree. And I was going to say about Wikipedia as well, to double defend it. I find that Wikipedia, one, they've actually done cross comparisons, and they've found that at this point, Wikipedia is more reliable than most encyclopedic texts that will come out because it's constantly being updated. And they find that the people that are updating it actually care about the information. There are also railguards they put into place, like trusted advisors to do editing, which I am very proud to say I got added as a trusted advisor to do edits on things, which I was very like, oh, hello, you know.
You're a scholar.
A true Wikipedia scholar. But I'm completely with you, and I've found that you're able to, more importantly than just read what's on Wikipedia, find where they found that information. Where is it actually coming from? Go read it and kind of discover it. It gives me hope because I'd like to think that people like you and us, we actually care about the truth of a situation. So even if we say something, we're always willing to go back and say, it actually turns out that wasn't true and here's why. And then actually find out what we discovered on it, which actually is going to be a really good segue to talk about Factor Actis.
I was just about to bring this up.
That totally sounded like an intro to a sponsorship. Factor Active. Today's episode is about Factor Active.
Take it away, Logan Paul. Guys, I love this new stuff. Drink. Factor Actis. It's going to be on the bottom of all of our boxing rings.
I could totally see Elon picking up Factor Actis, adding it to the Tesla brand.
Oh man,
right?
We should put money on what company is going to be
an all-natural
Factor Actis from him.
Blend of cabbages and leeks. You know, just have some like trad wife try to sell it to you on Instagram.
So let's talk about that story, because we had initially, for all those that are listening, and Max, you mentioned it in the video, don't you?
I do, yes.
So there's this thing related to Tesla called Factor Actis. You guys are more experts. Talk to me about it.
Okay, so initially, when I first messaged Max about the eating habits of Nikola Tesla, it was while I was doing the season, and we were talking about his earlier diet. But something pops up later on in his life called Factor Actis, and according to the internet, and also one reputable book that we used as a source, Tesla made his own unique blend of vegetables, specifically ones that didn't have uric acid, I want to say. White vegetables like...
Except that his idea of what caused uric acid turns out to be a little bit totally wrong.
Oh,
but anyway.
Almost certainly, right? But it's, this blend of cabbages and leeks, generally white vegetables, cauliflower, things like that, that is baked, ? Powdered, ? And then eaten as a soup or with water. And the first time that this shows up was actually on some Reddit posts that we found, which references it to a New York Times interview that happened in 1933.
Supposedly.
And I actually bought the subscription to New York Times to look through their entire archives, and not once throughout all of New York Times history, if it's digital at least, is Factor Actis mentioned. Then,
and definitely not in that 1933 article.
Yes.
Because you can read that 1933 article.
Yeah. And then I, put this in for my show notes for Max to have for the Nikola Tesla series. And then Max came back to me with a Russian website that we could not, for some reason, Google refused.
Something in Cyrillic.
Could not translate, where there was a interview between Nikola Tesla and a person with the last name Seeker ?
A dude.
And we read this interview, and it's absolutely fascinating. They cover the breadth of Nikola Tesla's entire life. And it then occurs to me, I think that this interview is a faux interview written by some historian in order to lay out Tesla as a character quickly and easily. And it turns out this faux interview was written by one of my primary sources for the Nikola Tesla series, Mark J. Cypher. And we go through, and it turns out in page 400 something of this gigantic book that I read a year ago, there was one mention of Factor Actis. And I called Max and I was like, we got to lead on Factor Actis. It's not just some random thing we saw on Reddit. It's not in the New York Times, but we got to lead. And then we look in the bibliography, and it's annotated as a letter from Nikola Tesla in 1942. Doesn't specify where the letter is found. Doesn't specify where the letter is located. And the only thing that I can go off of is that it's some textbook that was made by the University of Belgrade. And the only copy that I could find on the internet was a $200 book in another country. And there's no guarantee that the letter was even in it. So then I message Max again, say, hey, we have a lead, but it's not a lead that we can use. And Max goes, well, actually, we have it in the public library. And Max says, we're not able to look at it in time for the recording, but, if I ever find myself down there, we'll look it up. And during that time, I'm not sure if I updated you on this, but Mark Cypher, the author of Wizard, actually emailed me back and said that it was in a letter found at the Smithsonian Institute. I was stoked. I was like, I can't believe it. We've gone from Reddit post to Russian internet blog to letter annotated in an actual real book, which gave us a hint, to realizing we can't find the quote, to we're out of hope, to the actual author emails me back with a source. I'm so pumped. I called the Smithsonian Institute and they say, we haven't digitized it. If we do have it, you'd have to come and make an appointment to see it. So
tomorrow we're all hopping on a plane.
Dude, I would do it.
If I wasn't going to Egypt,
Heck yeah.
And to sort of put the end on this, Mark Cypher has not given us the specific location of the quote. The quote is not digital. So this weird potion that Nikola Tesla supposedly made is up in the air as to whether or not we made it. And for most people who are doing history education, or really who have a knack for history, having it quoted by a respected book would be good enough. But if we're going to make a video on the eating habits of Nikola Tesla, finding that original source, in my opinion, and I think also in yours, is necessary. So we ended up having to scrap the Factor Actis recipe, which was sort of the original idea.
Yeah, I think, it's... What is it? Extraordinary claims demand extraordinary evidence.
Yes.
If the claim had been something relatively innocuous, I would probably include it and just toss it in there, But this was one of the more interesting things. And the fact that he called it Factor Actis, which is not Latin, it's a faux Latin. And that doesn't seem very Nikola Tesla to me, but I don't know. It makes me think I would need to actually see in his handwriting.
Thank you.
Where he talked about this. And but with is it Cipher? Mark Cipher?
Yes, Cipher,
something.
I say Cipher because he's actually a handwriting expert, which is kind of funny.
Oh, interesting. With his faux interview, I'm sure he did not do that with the intention to mislead people that it was a real interview. It was, when he created it, he probably outlined that this is this is my interpretation of what an interview would have been to, cover all my bases. But then it gets repeated online, and that part is left out,
removed.
And so then you end up having this real interview between Seeker and Tesla that is not real. And that is how these things end up getting spread. That's
to add to that as well. I said this to Akiva when we were trying to determine the truth of this, is that I was like, I genuinely and look, maybe I just don't know Tesla enough. I just couldn't, first of all, imagine Tesla being like, all right, time to make my weird health potion. Let's go to the store and get myself 12 different vegetables and cook them down into a powder soup. Like, I have a really hard time getting to that place. And if that was the case, Tesla being the diligent note taker, writer, all that kind of stuff, to be like, oh yeah, he mentioned it one time in one letter 1 year before he died, is suspect to me, right?
He gave so many interviews, and he always talked about what he ate in them in great detail. Like, so many interviews about his diet I found. And so the fact that it's not mentioned, it's odd. It's odd.
And
I'm not saying that it's not real. I'm saying that it is odd.
I want to see the letter.
To add to this as well, and who knows if we take this out? I don't think so. I think it's fine.
No, we're going to add this.
Because it's fair.
We already decided we were burning it.
So this author, Mark Cipher, who I am sure really, like you said, was not trying to be malicious in any way, shape, or form. And I just want to say,
the book was airtight. The book is very well sourced.
And it's respected.
And respected by other historians.
But when we started looking into it, because when he reached out to us, when he reached out to us, he kind of was a little bit butthurt, it felt like. And he said, well, why didn't you interview me? I wrote these different books about Tesla, and I even made this series about Tesla with this, Prometheus Films. And
he's like, why didn't you interview me? You did a whole thing about Tesla and you didn't call me? You didn't think to call and interview me? I'm the premier thing. I have another book coming out and I have this thing from Prometheus Films. And then Daniel messages me and tells me what Prometheus Films is.
I look, because I can't not look this. And I'm a film guy. So I was like, Prometheus Films? I've never even heard about this before. So I look into it and I'm like, oh shit, they make Ancient Aliens, The Curse of Oak Island, The Secrets of Skinwalker Ranch. And then I look into it further. I'm like, oh, homie has actually been on Ancient Aliens 3 times, which, dude, I'm not trying to knock.
Once by accident, that's fine. But you got 2 more in there.
Whatever. But when I see that, I'm sorry, credibility is going to go down a peg or two.
It made me want to peel my skin off and look through every single thing I ever said about Tesla.
Yeah.
When I found out that this guy.
Worrying.
Right? So that was another part of it too, where it's like, hey man, I really hope that this is true. And maybe if we're in DC one day and we get to go to the Smithsonian, it's possible I'm actually going to be there because Kat has to go for a school thing.
Oh, nice.
And so she was like, oh, maybe you can just come and stay in the hotel room. And while I do my school thing, you can explore DC. So that isn't, I might try to do this just to it's driving me crazy, to be honest with you. But I hope it's true. But I also wonder of it's like the ancient alien people, the guy with the crazy hair. When he gets into a situation where he can't explain something, he goes, aliens, going right back to the beginning of our conversation. I almost do wonder if it was one of those where something was read and then he went oh, let's say this is a health potion and let's say it's called Factor Actis and let's say it's I don't know. I don't want that to be true.
will
I'm
argue
not saying
against,
it's true.
Yes.
I'm just curious.
My guess is the History Channel pipeline happened after he came out with this book. And it was just because he ended up doing the Nikola Tesla files, which I haven't watched. Who knows if it's good? But, History Channel is also famous for riveting shows such as Swamp People. And you're like, yeah, is this a Swamp People guy or is this a History Channel guy?
Yeah.
And, like I said,
that is a little worrying, but, and that's the thing. You can never tell. So one of my, then this just kind of put me in mind of it. So while I was researching Tesla, I read about this dinner that Tesla had with John Muir, Stanford White, the architect in New York, and Mark Twain. And this dinner that they had together at Delmonico's, and there was all this really cool information about it. And I couldn't find any primary sources. And it turns out PBS, and I love PBS. Yes. I love, it's from the American Experience. But if you go onto the American Experience website, this is the origin of this dinner. And they very clearly talk about Tesla could have run into these type of people, and we picked 4 of them to try and understand how the inventor fit into the context of his time. Imagine them sitting at a table together enjoying Delmonico's signature chicken a la king. What would they have talked about? And then it gives all of this stuff. So none of it's actually happened, but all over the internet, I'm finding things about this dinner with Mark Twain and everything. And it was just like, first of all, it hurt that it wasn't real because it was so interesting. But second of all...
Oh, go ahead. Sorry, Max. I'm going to cut you off.
Oh, no. But they did know each other. They did meet and everything.
That's what I was about to say. Because Mark Twain and Tesla were best buds. In fact, when Tesla started to lose his mind, he would send checks to what he thought was Mark Twain's address because he thought that Mark Twain was still alive and he thought that Mark Twain needed money, which was very true for most of his life.
And Mark Twain knew Stanford White, and Stanford White was one of the architects, I told you about this in the episode, who helped build one of Tesla's factories.
Then why make it up?
In northern New York. So that part is true. And by the way, also Stanford White, fascinating story. I might do a small series on him.
You should.
Do you know about his murder?
Murder?
No.
Oh yeah.
So he's fascinating. If you've ever seen the musical Ragtime, there's a passing reference to it.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because the woman who was the showgirl is one of the characters in Ragtime.
Oh,
okay. So Akiva, just for your knowledge, very, very paraphrased, is that basically there was this woman who I can't remember her name, but to be honest with you, she was kind of a fox. I've seen
Evelyn
pictures.
Nesbit.
There you go. Oh man, you're sharp. I love it. So
I know my musicals.
I was like, damn, you know your history. No, you know your musicals. You know your history too. But so she was in a relationship with another guy, and then she ended up having this more or less affair with Stanford White. And then the other guy was super obsessive and became so obsessed with them and like, she's not his property and all this kind of stuff. He murdered Stanford White.
Whoa.
It was like in 1911 or something like that, I want to say. And I can't remember. He didn't kill Nesbit, did he?
She ended up making a career out of it.
There it was. Yep.
Ooh.
Yep. And
very Chicago.
The guy, I think he went like insane or something like that, and then ended up getting committed, maybe even committed suicide.
So it was the man who was the murderer.
Yeah.
He was he was like a multi-millionaire.
Yes.
Big businessman, Harry Kendall Thaw.
There we go.
That sounds like a rich guy.
And he murdered Stanford White in front of an audience of people.
Whoa.
That's insane.
On the rooftop of Madison Square Garden.
That's right.
Yeah, no, it is. Yeah. And the whole thing was, so his trial was the trial of the century, but it was only 1906. So they were like, they didn't know about O.J. Simpson.
That's incredible. Honestly, that's that seems more dramatic than the OJ trial because there was an audience, a live
I know.
studio audience.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
No, it's crazy.
Anyways, but that's why I say, like, I would say if you took out John Muir from that initial conversation, because I'm like, I don't even know that John Muir ever went to New York. Like, he was known to be a recluse who just went up into Yosemite. His family, if you didn't know this about him, he would just go, I gotta go. And he would leave, and his family didn't know when he would be back. Sometimes he'd be back in 2 weeks. Sometimes he'd be back in 6 months. He would just be hiking around Yosemite by himself, which is why Teddy Roosevelt ended up going out to Yosemite, because he was like, I want to know this John Muir guy.
Whoa.
Like, so maybe he went to New York at some point, but like, the basic stuff I know about John Muir is like the guy didn't want to be in New York. He just wanted to be left alone in the middle of the woods, you know?
Yeah.
That's incredible.
He's on my list, by the way, John Muir. He's the reason really that we have national parks.
Huh.
It was. I thought
it was Teddy.
Well, yes, because of John Muir.
Teddy was the one that made it happen, but John Muir was the inspiration.
Interesting.
Because John Muir showed Teddy
Daniel
Roosevelt
has completely
Yosemite.
ruined my beautiful perception of Teddy Roosevelt that I've had ever since I was a kid and read like a 50-page biography of him, and has informed me that he is actually not a super cool guy and kind of a warmonger and all sorts of crazy stuff.
He was an amazing person, but a warmonger, an avid racist.
Really? That's such a bummer.
He was the man of his time, most definitely.
Mark Twain.
All I know is that he got shot and he interviewed the guy who shot him during a speech, and I think that's incredible.
He finished giving the speech too.
Yeah.
No, but Mark Twain on record said that he thinks that Teddy Roosevelt was the worst president America ever had. He wrote a lot of stuff about Teddy Roosevelt over a 10+ year period about how much he thought this guy was a villain. So like it definitely even shifted my perspective on it.
And there was some even references to maybe perhaps modern context as well.
Oh yeah.
But
you know what? He helped. He was instrumental in breaking up the monopolies.
That's what I know about him.
Become president, that wouldn't have happened because he shouldn't have been president is the thing. You know, it happened essentially by accident. And yeah, we need that again.
So. Yeah. Oh, I completely agree. And
seriously.
I think it's like even Ken Burns said it the best, where when he just released this Revolutionary War documentary series, The Epic, and it was Hassan Minhaj who was interviewing him, and Hassan Minhaj says, so Ken, let me ask you, George Washington, hero or villain? Wink. He says wink out loud, and Ken Burns completely brushes it off and goes, I think it's really difficult to do that because any single hero that we want to look back on, we always have to understand they were imperfect people.
Pancho Villa is a fantastic example. We talked about him. He went from Robin Hood to the Genghis Khan of Mexico over the course of his life. And you can't do that. Like even with Da Vinci, I remember I was particularly disappointed when I found out that Da Vinci's sort of lover boyfriend Salai was like 13, 14 when the two got together.
I thought you said it was 12.
It was young, right? And my initial gut reaction was incredible disappointment because Da Vinci has always been one of my heroes. But then you also think about the context, and it in no way excuses the behavior, to be perfectly clear. But you think about the context, the issue was not that Salai had a boyfriend. The issue wasn't that Salai's boyfriend was 13. The issue was that Salai had a boyfriend, because all of the men who were straight in this society were dating 12-year-olds and marrying 12-year-olds on a very regular basis.
Oh, yeah.
So that wouldn't have been an issue that they had taken up. They're like, oh, you're dating somebody who's 12 years old? Well, I guess that makes sense. It's a boy. Oh, my God. And then that would have been the issue that they had with him. So there is just in you. And I understand the sentiment. You have this picture of a hero in your mind. This happens a lot in American political history. You have this picture of a hero in your mind, and you want him to remain untarnished. But that is a story, and that is not history. Yep. You have to tell the whole thing. You know?
Do you know the quote, "The past is a foreign country"?
I don't think so.
I think that's the quote. I might be paraphrasing. But it's basically saying, you know, the past is so foreign to us that it is like going to another country studying the past. And there's also, it actually might, it's attributed to Mark Twain. I don't know if he actually said it, but something about the remedy to prejudice is travel, something like that.
That's Mark Twain.
And it's so true. The more you travel and get to know other people from other cultures, the more you begin to understand them. Even if you don't agree with them, there is a degree of empathy. And it's like, oh, I can see now why you believe what I've always thought was absolutely crazy. The more you study history, it's the same. You begin to, especially because every single event is more complicated than we make it out to be. You know, whether it's from the dropping of the atomic bomb to Genghis Khan doing his thing to every, you know, little things. It's like it is always more complicated. And sometimes, unfortunately, we don't know all of the factors that go into certain things throughout history, but definitely later on, by the 18th and 19th century, when so much is being written down, if you choose to dig deeper into things, you'll find out that these events that on the surface seem bad are more complicated and are like, well, gosh, what would I have done in that situation? I'm not sure that this horrible decision was the wrong one because it is kind of the only one that this person could have made. And vice versa. Sometimes we'll see something as, oh, this is a very patriotic, you know, event, the Boston Massacre or whatever. And then you learn a little bit more about it and you're like, oh, there are two sides or 20 sides to every story. And so it's like, oh, maybe this wasn't such a great thing. Maybe there were alternative, you know.
I think about this a lot too with the idea, and people sometimes get that concept wrong, the exact one that you're trying to point out, and start to get on this like moral relativism thing. And I think that, at least for me, my humble opinion is that ethics are not relative, but context is, right? So, you know, when you look at Pancho Villa's life and his decision making, and you see every single experience that Pancho goes through, at the end of it, if you really are paying attention, you have to ask yourself, how could Pancho not become Pancho Villa, right? How could this person not become that person based off of the context? That is not to say that the ethics are relative, right? We talk about this a lot when we were talking with Shelley Fishkin about the character Jim and how he was perceived in Huckleberry Finn. The South was racist, right? But being racist was okay. Not that they weren't, because that was back in the past and that was acceptable. No, they were. They just hadn't reached a level of ethics that we have now. You know what I'm saying?
And in 50 years or 100 years, people will look back on our ethics. I mean, I think that one of those
it's happening
things,
even faster now with the internet, right? You can say something that seems okay 10 years ago, and then
it's like,
and then you're like, oh my God, why did I say that?
Yeah. I think that the way that we treat animals in 200 years will seem abominable to people. I really do. And yet, I'm about to go have a hamburger. So, you know, it's kind of
like, I'm so glad I don't live in 2200.
Exactly. I just think, you know, even whenever I'm studying somebody in history, even if they are a villain, I try to at least understand why. And usually it makes it so they're not so much a villain. They're more of just a shitty human being.
I mean, and even then, so there's a podcast that I won't name the name of because I don't want to shit on them too hard, but it's basically this fairly short form. I want to say every single episode is 30 to 45 minutes. And in that time, they try to decide if a person from history is a scumbag or a hero, right? And to me, that's incredibly
productive
and kind of disgusting, to be honest with you, because you know, I think any single human being, if you try to reduce them down to one or two things that they've done in their life, I think we're all probably going to look like terrible human beings. you know?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it's what I like to do, at least I hope we try to do through our show, is expose these ideas that it can be both. And sometimes the scales can be tipped in one direction or another, but finding the sort of the truth of who these people were, what they actually did, how they did what they did, and why they did what they did is more illuminating than reducing it down to were they terrible or were they good?
Yeah. And it's just so easy. And it's we all do it. It's, you know, I'm not guilty of this, but it's just so easy to say, well, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have made that decision. I wouldn't have been like that.
And you just don't know that.
You don't know that. And almost always the answer is yes. It probably would have been, because very often the people who are making what we would consider the moral choice back then is this tiny sliver of the population. And it's like, so you think that you would have been in that 0.01%? And not the 99.9%. Yeah, you probably would have been in the 99.9%.
Hank Green kind of talks about this too, with the idea of free will being, you're not really driving your own car, you're more steering an elephant, where it's like you think that you're so, and it can even come down to stuff like diet, right? When you're choosing to eat something healthy versus not. The same thing happens with culture, where you feel like you have so much more control over the decision making that you do, but so much of it is based off of your environment, your previous history, the stimuli that you had before. That's why early psychologists thought that they could just engineer a person into becoming an astronaut if they wanted to, because it really, like, environment really does affect that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But before we get like too far into the whole moral relative things, I did want to like just talk about a little more lighthearted stuff, kind of get behind the scenes on some of the stuff that you do over on your side with Tasting History. A question that I had for you, because it kind of brought me into when we were talking about the formatting for your videos, how you were talking about how a lot of your videos follow a very strict format that's really enjoyed by the audience. If you were not thinking about the formatting and the regiment that the audience really enjoys, what would be sort of the videos that you'd like to make? Because I think about episodes that do the best tend to be the ones where you're eating the weirdest, perhaps grossest stuff, whether it's ninja medicine balls or hardtack or garum. What are the things that, if you're like, if I got the same viewership as I do with the episodes that do well, I would be doing this instead?
I don't know. I mean, sometimes it would be exactly what I'm doing, but sometimes I do wish I'll come across a topic and I'm like, I want to talk about this, but it really doesn't have anything to do. You know, it's kind of hard to make a recipe to go along with it. And so sometimes I'm like, I wish that I could just make a video that didn't have any cooking. It was just food history in there, or just history in general, you know? Or vice versa. I have so many recipes I would love to make, but there's nothing to talk about. Most food doesn't have a history because nobody's written down, you know. So there are so many dishes that I'm like, oh, I would love to go through these old cookbooks and make this, but I don't really have anything to talk about except making the dish, you know.
Is there ever an episode where you are like, I want to talk about this interesting thing, and I'm just going to find some food from some time around there that I want to eat, where you're like, we're making croissants and we're going to talk about the French Revolution. You know, and you're just like, because I want a croissant.
No, that does happen, and it's happening more and more often because I am feeling like I can, you know, be like, you know what, I want to tell this story, and it's my show. Yeah. So I get to...
You're like, it's my show. You can't make me eat the gross stuff.
I'm doing what I want, damn it. And also, I have a recommendation for you if you've not already done this. Have you done anything yet on the tradition of eating black-eyed peas on New Year's?
Yes.
You did?
I did. Yes, I did a video with, I think it's the last time I had somebody on the show. Michael Twitty, who is a wonderful food historian of African American and African foodways, and he came on and talked, and we made it. And just dealing with the sound and editing that was such a beast that I was like, Yep, not gonna do that again.
Which then brings me up to the follow-up question, because we're always talking about the work thing. But if you could just do, if money wasn't an issue, if formatting wasn't an issue outside of work, if you weren't making tasting history, what would you be doing?
Oh,
nothing is also
together...
a good answer.
Yeah, no, I got to do something. Like I'm not one of those people who can do nothing. I do love TV, but even when I'm watching TV, I'm always putting together Lego. I put together a lot of Lego. That is my retirement plan.
Daniel too.
And so Lego, travel, and I think I would still need to work. And what I would love to do is write historical fiction novels that don't need to sell. But that's actually what I was trying to do before I started tasting history. And it takes up so much time that I haven't been able to go back to it, but eventually I would like to.
That's incredible. Yeah. Daniel is also a Lego man. We for your birthday, you got a new set that kind of had to do a little bit. No, not birthday, Christmas.
For Christmas,
yeah.
Actually, Max, partly because of your recommendation, and also because I like Mark Twain and all things related to Mark Twain. She got me the paddle boat that I can see in the background right there.
You can just see the very, 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 very edge of it right there.
You're right. It was an awesome build.
It's a great build.
So fun. Yeah. The only thing that I'm disappointed in is that, you know how at the very bottom floor of it, there's the one piston engine?
Yeah.
It's not connected to the wheel or the wheel on the bottom in any way, shape, or form. So when you roll it, it doesn't move. It's just like a little thing you spin and it pumps.
You want it to be connected.
I want it to be connected. Like I do Technics. And if you haven't done Technics before, they're awesome. The cars that you can build for Technics, when you move them, the entire engine moves. And you can see, all the pistons.
I've never done Technics.
Oh, dude. Like, please do a Technic soon. It's a totally different type of building, but you have to pay closer attention and it generally takes longer, but it's all mechanical. So everything fits together in these ways that, so like for the cars, like I said, when you move them, you build the transmission and you build the differential in the back so that the wheels can move independently and still power the engine. Like,
look at him go.
It's awesome, dude. I'm telling you, you'll love it.
I need to do it.
But anyhow, so yes, I'm with you. I'm a total Lego dork, and my only thing against them is that they take up so much space that I have to find space for them, you know?
Yeah. That's the problem is you finish a Lego set and you're like, wow, what do I do with this?
Yep.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean. Some of them I just take apart and they're sitting in boxes or whatever. And I'm like, maybe someday I'll put them together again. But I've done that before. And when it's not in the bags, if they're really big sets, it's kind of not fun. Or in the case of what just happened a couple days ago, I have the Eiffel Tower, which is one of the largest sets ever. And my cat knocked it over. So
no.
But the thing is, it's been sitting there for 3 years, so it's no longer needs a home because my cat knocked it over, and there's no way I'm going to be putting that thing back together. So
there you go.
Now, my wife and I have tried to build Legos together, and
no.
Okay, so you and Jose do not build Legos together at all.
So the first time that we'll do it at the same time, but independently.
Yes.
This is not a team effort, except he got me Starry Night.
Oh, cool.
For Christmas. The problem is I am partially colorblind.
Me too. What type of colorblind?
I have several different issues. So I have big trouble with red and green, which is very common, but I also have trouble with brown and red and green and yellow and orange and red and blue and purple and pink.
Dude, we have the same type of colorblindness. You're the only other person that I've met who is the colorblind in the same way, because people will be like, is this red? And I'm like, yes, I can tell that's red.
Yeah.
But then if purple and blue are together, I'm like, that blue looks red.
They're the same. Yeah, it's very odd. And
do you know
so
what I'm
often
saying?
It has to do just with the lighting in the room.
Yes.
Like
Christmas colors.
Wildly.
If it's like a forest green and like a wine red, I'm screwed.
I'm laughing because you guys are like, I have a very specific type of color blindness, and then you listed all the colors.
No, seriously. It's a very, because very often men have red green, so it's just red and green that they have issues with. I have issues with a lot of colors. But the problem is there are like, there's a section where it's like 6 different shades of blue. And I was like, I only see 2. So we did this together. He laid out all the pieces. He said, okay, this is so that's the first time that we've done something together. It's that I just needed his help with the colors. But if he puts even one piece together, you just throw the whole thing away.
You ruined it.
I have to do, Tesla and I have a few things in common. I feel like that's something that Tesla would have been like, no,
get out.
Well, sorry, go ahead, Max.
I actually have to get going.
I was just about to say, we can start to wrap this up here. Last thing I'll ask you, though, and then I'll let you go, is tell us a little bit about ketchup.
You saw my question.
I did.
The actual food ketchup?
Yeah, tell us about the condiment, because we know... No, I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, it likely started as ketchup, which was...
Oh, we're joking with you. You know what we're saying. Your show.
Oh, Ketchup with Max and Jose.
Come on.
I was like,
okay, we were not on the same page. I was actually very interested in what he was going to say about ketchup.
I was saying, tell us about your show. You can tell us about ketchup if you want to. I was just saying, I'm trying to give you a plug for your other show.
No, so Ketchup with Max and Jose is Jose's show, and so I never push him to put out an episode, which is why I believe in the last year he's only put out one. He'll go in a spurt. He'll do like 2 or 3, and then for 9 months, nothing. We'll probably do one after our trip to Egypt, because we tend to kind of talk about it's more of behind the scenes stuff.
Gotcha.
Because I just don't put that kind of stuff on the channel. So it's behind the scenes stuff. And sometimes it's about his gardening and my Lego and what movie he's working on, because he still works at Disney. And if there were interesting foods that we tried while we were traveling. So there'll probably be an episode coming out, but it is inconsistent at best.
You need to be reading your comments
that
again.
way.
That episode where you read your comments was amazing. I thought that was so
comments,
funny.
Yeah.
Well, also the nice ones too. I like the nice ones.
And the nice ones. Yes.
Yeah, having that very conservative dude kind of realize something about him when he saw your steely blue eyes, I thought was one of my favorite comments
that was hilarious. Yes.
In the series.
All right, well, we'll wrap everything up here, Max. I know you got to get going, but man, cannot say thank you enough for joining us today, for working with us on this Tesla video that for all of the people that are listening today is up currently. Go check it out. Channel is Tasting History with Max Miller. It is excellent. If you like history, this is a mix of basically like Food Network plus history in the best possible way. It's absolutely fantastic. Akiva, you were actually one that turned me on to it as well.
Mm-hmm.
So go check it out, everybody. Max, again, thanks so much for joining us today. And for all of our listeners, do remember, like always, ignorance is not stupidity. It is the absence of knowledge. And I do hope you learned something today.
I love it.
See ya.
You've been listening to The Biographers. For more information, please visit thebiographerspodcast.com.